My wife Glenda and I have always appreciated how Jesus relates to children and young people. In the book of Isaiah, he has the prophet record there in Isaiah chapter 8, verse 18, "Here am I and the children that the Lord has given me." Our son Justin was born, and just after his birth, my wife and I, standing over Justin's crib, just looked at each other and started crying, recognizing that, wow, this is the life that God has entrusted to us. And from there, we purposed in our hearts that while he was a young boy, while he was a child, we would talk to Jesus about him, but we would also talk to him about Jesus. And when he got older, we would make sure, no matter what, that we continued to talk to Jesus about him. And we do that and encourage parents to do the same. When they're young, talk to them about Jesus. As our children grow older and they move on in life, talk to Jesus about them. I remember as a young pastor, pastoring a church, and during that time, we were praying for our young people. And I was impressed of the Lord to actually call them. And so we would start to phone them during prayer meeting, put them on speakerphone, and pray with them. It got to the place where we were even calling overseas to our students from Bermuda, and we would often catch them during supper time. A couple of times, we even were able to include their friends with them as we were in prayer meeting at church, and just mentioning them and lifting them up before the Lord. Because we firmly believe when they're young, make sure you're talking to them about Jesus. And as they grow older, talk to Jesus about them. One of the young adults that who was at the time away in school, her father said, I really want us to pray for my daughter. So we prayed for her. It just so happened that a couple of weeks later, as we continued to pray for our young adults and our children, she reported how she was walking home one evening by herself, and she was off campus, and a man approached her and grabbed her, and she was able to get loose and ran for her safety. I don't know, but I can't help but attribute a part of that situation and her being able to escape this man's clutches, attribute it to prayer, and the prayer of her parents, the prayer of our church family. That same young lady, not long after, started experiencing a paralysis in her lower limbs. We prayed and continued to pray, and she got better, the doctors not knowing what was going on at that time. She returned to Bermuda, and this paralysis came upon her again. Someone in our church family said, Pastor, this is a situation where perhaps we should anoint her. And so a group of us, elders and a couple of our prayer warriors, her parents, went to her hospital room. We sang hymns and we talked to her about her relationship with Jesus, and she affirmed that relationship. There in the hospital room, as one of the ladies laid hands on her motionless lower limbs, I prayed for her. And just as I was beginning the prayer, the lady who had her hand on the lower leg said, "I felt movement." And so, of course, we opened our eyes, and the lady looked at me, I looked at the lady, and I kept praying. And a moment later, I was praying with my eyes open. I could see her feet moving, and I said, "Move your feet some more." And we just spontaneously began to thank the Lord for returning movement to this young lady's limbs right there in the hospital room. Well, the doctor brushed it off, but we knew and believed firmly that it was the hand of the Lord upon her that had restored mobility to her limbs. She was out of the hospital, and a few weeks later, the same thing happened. But interestingly enough, as she returned to the doctor with these paralyzed lower limbs, they were able to ascertain that the situation was some chemical deficiency in her body, and so they were able to regulate it. Well, you know what? We still attribute even that to the Lord. Remember the story in Mark 8 where Jesus heals the blind man, but on the first touch with the spit and mud that had been applied to the eyes, he said, after it was washed away, he said, "I see men like trees walking." Not every prayer is answered immediately. Not every prayer for healing or for our children is answered on the spot. But I will say this, never give up praying. When they're small, talk to them about Jesus. As they get older, even when they move away from that relationship, that familial relationship with Christ, when they drift from faith, continue to talk to Jesus about them. Jesus will save our children. God bless you as you and I continue to pray for our loved ones and our precious flock, the sheep, the little lambs that Jesus has entrusted to us.